Today I want to share with you how I went from reading 10 books in a year to reading 25 books in a year to then finally reading over 200 books in a year. So how I read so many books and why that isn't something that I recommend. So in 2015 I found Goodreads and saw the Goodreads reading challenge. So that was the year after I quit grad school. I started reading again and I really enjoyed that. And I didn't read a huge amount of books that year compared to a lot of people on Goodreads. I read 25, but that was the most I had read since probably middle school or elementary school. And it gave me a lot of confidence after dropping out of grad school that I could still do things and I could still accomplish things that I set my mind to, and I wasn't going to be a failure forever. So then as the years went on, I started trying to make it a goal to read even more, and I accomplished this in a variety of ways. Initially, these were really good habits, like taking my lunch break to read instead of browse the internet, or having the last thing I do before I go to sleep be reading instead of watching TV or browsing on my phone or watching YouTube. These were positive changes that improved the quality of my life and made me healthier and happier and more satisfied with myself, and I was mostly getting into and reading books that I really enjoyed. But as the years went on and I started feeling like I could be even more ambitious with my reading goals, I just kept pushing that limit of what I thought I could read up. And in order to do this, I had to get into some things that made my reading worse. I looked into speed reading and I tried to speed read as fast as possible. And I think the process of learning speed reading did increase my overall base reading speed. Like right now, I still read much faster than I think I did beforehand, but I would try so hard to speed read that I was incredibly focused on the act of reading the words and not so much the act of absorbing the content, that I was skimming more than I was reading, and also the act of reading instead of being a relaxing, pleasurable one was work. In addition, because the number of books read was the only goal that mattered for Goodreads, I would start reaching for books that were shorter just to get my numbers up, which I tend to be a person who likes longer books, and the occasional short book I really love, but in general, longer books are my jam. I started reading audiobooks, which I don't think was a bad thing, but then I trained myself to try and listen to those books at triple speed, and just like with speed reading at too high a level, I wasn't enjoying that. It wasn't a satisfying, relaxing activity for me, and I wasn't absorbing as much of the story as I wanted to. I was really listening to a lot of audiobooks really fast just to be able to say, I read an entire book today, because then you can read like a short book in an hour or an average sized book in like 3 hours on audiobook. As this was happening, I was having a really hard time at work. I was doing my job and I was getting praise, but I didn't feel like that career fit me, and I didn't feel like the work environment fit me. And I was really depressed because I didn't feel like I was accomplishing anything worthwhile or long-term at work. But what I was accomplishing on a regular basis was reading a lot of books. This goal of reading a lot of books became my ultimate goal for something that I could accomplish that I had full power over. So I was struggling at work, I was depressed, and reading was the thing that I had as part of my identity that made me a smart and worthwhile person, and that I could kind of feel superior about when everything else in my life I felt inferior about. And so I started trying to read in situations that were really even causing more detriment to those areas of my life that I felt dissatisfied with that I was reading to compensate for. I was trying to listen to audiobooks while doing my work, which did not work for either thing. I was reading books on my phone while I was with my friends because I was trying to get that one more book read for that week. During like boring meetings, I was trying to occasionally, when there was a part that wasn't relevant to me, read things on the side, and I totally missed things and just looked like an idiot. And what actually kind of snapped me out of it was someone being honestly kind of a jerk online, where I'd gone on Reddit to kind of brag about the number of books that I had read so far, honestly, and someone's like, there's no way you read that many books, or at least you didn't read them well. And I was so offended, but at the same time, I knew they were right. I knew there were some books that I'd read even in the past 3 months that I couldn't tell you the plot of. There were books that I went through so quickly that I might have loved them, but because I didn't absorb the salient points, they ended up just being okay in my memory. And because I forced myself to finish books that I wasn't liking or weren't good for my mood or mental health at the time, I probably hated some books because they were too emotionally prevalent for me at that moment in order to appreciate them rather than feeling like they hurt me too much. And those are exactly the kind of books that have the potential to be books that you absolutely love, are the ones that are emotionally resonant with a part of your life that you remember, but maybe not that you're deep into at that time. I was forcing myself to finish them at a time in my life when it was too painful. So that's why when occasionally I come across a post or a question from someone online that says, hey, how do I read more? How do I read faster? My question is, why? Because some people wanting to do that are like me in my first year of getting out of college and remembering that I loved reading and being excited about just pushing myself a little bit to read a little more. You want to absorb new stories. You want to have that sense of relaxation. You want to substitute some of your Reddit and TV and YouTube time with sitting down and reading a good book and finding stories that you love. But it can warp into this act of reading as accomplishment, and that ends up being kind of performative, either to the people that you casually mention to online or in your Goodreads friends, or whether it's performative to yourself, trying to convince yourself that you are a smart person because you read all these books. And maybe you are, but the reading of books isn't the thing that makes you smart and intelligent and worthwhile. That's a great aspect of your personality if you love reading, but reading 300 books versus 150 versus 50 versus 20 in a year is only an accomplishment if it's a good thing for you. So if you are someone who wants to read more, make sure you're doing it for a good reason that is beneficial to you. Are you doing it to absorb more stories, explore more world, and absorb more that you find satisfying? Are you doing it because you're in school and you have a lot of learning that you want to do and you want to understand more about your field and be a better student? That's worthwhile. I think that usually if it's something different, then I want to achieve a certain number because that'll make me seem like a good reader, it's probably valid. In those cases, here are my suggestions. Look into speed reading and kind of practice with reading as fast as you can, but then slow down a little bit. You don't want to read as fast as your eyes can possibly skim the words. You want to train yourself to be able to read as fast as possible, and then let yourself regulate for at what speed you actually still enjoy the story. Same exact thing with audiobooks. You can practice getting up to 3x speed, but then make sure you bring it down to whatever level is actually enjoyable for you and where you feel like you're getting all the information. If someone asks you what the book was about and you don't remember, but you would normally, that's probably a sign you're going through it too fast. Second, I would recommend that maybe instead of tracking the number of books read, just track the number of pages you've read. That way you don't have to stick with a book that isn't working for you at the time, because if you've read 100 pages in a book, you've read 100 pages in that book. The number of pages counts. And I found that when I'm not absolutely forcing myself through it, I'll get through a book I'm enjoying way faster than a book that I'm hating. I got through Wise Man's Fear in like a day because I just woke up, opened it up, sat on the couch, and was absorbed into it for hours. Next, I would suggest finding some kind of group of people that are reading something that you actively want to read. Buddy reading is a great way of making sure that you're dedicating as much time to reading as you actually want to. And speaking of making the time to read, experiment a little bit with reading during different times of the day and see when you enjoy and absorb the most. My personal view on reading has slowly gotten healthier from something I'm doing to accomplish something to something I do because I enjoy it and it benefits me. And if you want to read more, please keep that in mind as you're pursuing that goal of more books or more pages or whatever. After all, after every video, I don't say lots of reading or impressive reading or aspirational reading. I say happy reading.